Vasil Ivanchuk from Ukraine. What a legend. He's just won the Menorca Open tournament with 8 out of 9, which has catapulted him back into the world's top 100. I'm just delighted for him. He's 56 years old and still slugging it out wherever he goes. And I can tell you, in these open tournaments where you can't predict your opponents and you've got all these young kids after you, that is a really impressive performance. So let's have a look at one of his games. So this is played in round 7. Ivanchuk has black, and his opponent is a young Bulgarian grandmaster. He's 19 years old, Momchil Petkov. You see, it's not easy against the kids, I'm telling you. But let's see how Ivanchuk tackles him. So d4, d5, and Ivanchuk has a very solid start. Okay, now he starts to mix things up a little bit. He takes and knight c3. So that indicates that white is up for a big fight. You could just go into a normal queen's gambit accepted with e3. But knight c3, c6. So we're transposing into a Slav. And instead of a4, Petkov goes for e4. So this is a gambit. This is really sharp. So white claims the center, and black has claimed this pawn. Now e5 was the traditional old move, but Petkov plays queen c2. This is quite trendy. It's a speciality of the German grandmaster Matthias Blühbaum. And it means that, well, white keeps options open. You might well push with e5, but you can do other stuff as well. Okay, here we go. e6. Blühbaum, I should say, likes to play bishop e2 here, but Petkov wants to just break up those pawns. And now knight a6 from Ivanchuk. It's already quite a rare position, actually. But I have to say, I like knight a6 because it comes into this very nice square on b4 with tempo. The queen looks rather modestly placed on b1, but actually, well, we'll see. It comes into the game very quickly. Okay, why is Ivanchuk playing this little pawn move at the side of the board? Well, it's to support the b5 pawn because he wants to tackle white's center, challenge white's center with c5. Okay, so white castles. Bishop b7. Now, I mean, if black is allowed to develop here, bishop e7 castles and play c5, then I don't think white has any real compensation for the pawn. So he's got to press forward. e5. I suppose you could say that the natural move is to put that knight in the middle, but knight e4, it's not so easy for black to achieve c5, and with that bishop shut in, not so clear. I mean, you can sack the pawn, but it's another story. But that's why Ivanchuk played knight d7, covering the c5 square, so he's guaranteed to get that move in. And knight e4 is possible, but okay, here's Petkov's idea. So that's one of the ideas of putting the queen on c2. You bring the queen into play very quickly. It's a little bit vulnerable on the e4, of course, but it's going to transfer to the king side very quickly. Knight g5, so he's really going for it. And queen g4. There we are. So the queen looks at a couple of sensitive spots here. g7. And, well, you never know, there could be some kind of sacrifice here as well. But Ivanchuk is not fazed. He continues with his plan of liberation. c5, opening up the bishop on the long diagonal. That was taken. Queen takes c5. And white has to react quickly here because you can see he's a pawn down. But also that e-pawn is about to drop. So white desperately needs some play here to get some threats. So the knight hits the queen, and queen takes g7 might be on the cards. So Ivanchuk just chops one of those knights off and plays queen takes e5. Now that means, giving away the bishop is, you could say, a contentious decision. That bishop was so beautiful, but it means that the queen is now attacking the rook. So Ivanchuk's trying to buy time to bring his king to safety. And then he's 2 pawns up. Okay, so white has an idea. It's a very forcing continuation, bishop f4. And this involves so much calculation for both sides. But that's something that Ivanchuk is brilliant at. He doesn't mind complexity. In fact, he embraces it. He loves to calculate so deeply and play these kind of anomalous, unusual positions. Queen takes knight. Okay, he's taken a piece, but he's landed in a skewer here. Queen stepped to the side. Interesting. Okay, so what happens if bishop takes rook? Well, then g5. And Ivanchuk is going to win that bishop on f4 because of the pin. So, rook fd1. Okay, that looks like a very natural move, and this looks very scary for black. You know, these two bishops, the rook is still on prise. The rook is looking at the knight. I mean, at the moment, black is a piece up, but this is scary. You know, what could you play here? Well, Ivanchuk had prepared this, knight d3, which is the best move according to the computer. I mean, this is so uncompromising. To even sort of get involved in calculating this, you know, I'd look at this and go, oh, this looks so dubious for black, because, you know, this is a self-pin. There are so many sensitive points in the position. I mean, not least black's king, actually. But Ivanchuk trusts his calculation. And this bishop is threatened. This pawn is threatened. I mean, who knows what's happening here? Apart from the computer, of course. So white took the rook in the corner. And if this bishop is taken, then actually white stands better. After this, rook takes. I mean, white has tremendous activity there. And if Ivanchuk castles, then queen f3 protects this one. Remember, that's quite a lineup of pieces on the d file, actually. So white is actually okay there. So Ivanchuk was forced to career on and take on f2. King h1. But that hasn't solved all his problems. I mean, white's king is okay on h1. This is threatened. The knight is threatened. This all looks very shaky. But Ivanchuk has calculated this all out. Knight takes bishop. Okay. Well, what about rook f1? That was played. Hasn't this all gone wrong for black? Well, this next move of Ivanchuk's is extraordinary. Knight d3. I mean, it's incredible. These pieces are just kind of floating there. They're not anchored by pawns, which is what you really want for your minor pieces. But there's enough protection here. Of course, a rook takes queen, knight takes queen, wins the queen back with a nice fork. And this is quite extraordinary. What about queen e4? Hitting this one? Well, actually, after queen d2, and then knight f2 check is threatened. So Petkov played bishop c6. Now, I mean, to my eyes, I can imagine, I'm a chicken, and I would think, right, get the king out as quickly as possible. Castles, give the knight, bring the queen back. Black has, let me see, a knight and 3 pawns for a rook. I mean, that looks fantastic for black. And very safe. The king is safe. What's not to like? Looks fairly simple to play. But what does Ivanchuk do? No. He maintains the complexity. Bishop c5. Oh my word. I mean, this is really... he has such confidence in these crazy positions. Well, black, of course, has a threat. Queen g1 and knight f2, the classic Philidor smothered mate. And still, if the queen is taken, then knight takes and the king, queen are forked. Okay, but still, there's so many loose pieces here. Well, white took the knight, so now the king is in the middle, and queen d1, another pin. I mean, this is so scary, really scary. But Ivanchuk came back with a queen. Okay, all the pieces are lined up again. If rook takes pawn check, did you realize that was on? In fact, black is winning, the rook is hit, and then a knight f2 check is threatened. So Petkov played rook a2 to defend against this threat. King e7. Okay, that looks more secure. The king finds a home in front of these pawns. Queen f3. Okay, still looks really scary with the queen hitting here, maybe a check. f5. Okay, good move. So the king can find a home on f6. If there's a check on b7, for example. Okay, b4, that's a randomizer if ever I saw one. Just hoping that however this pawn is captured, it's going to disturb black's coordination. Bishop b6, everything is okay. Rook e2, okay, take care. There are some threats here. Maybe takes and queen f5. Okay, g6. Queen c6, still very scary. Knight e5. Queen check and king f6. Okay, that's better. That's a happy home from the king. But it's not over yet. White has managed to coordinate. Those rooks are connected and doubled. So this is really scary. Now this is move 34. I can imagine that both players must have been very short of time at this moment. And in such complex positions, of course, it starts to get really random. Here, in fact, knight d3 would have settled matters. Because after the check, in fact, the rook is threatened, knight f2 is threatened. And this, well, that's obviously a winning endgame. So, yeah, instead, Ivanchuk wants to activate his rook. He played rook here. Well, he spotted that, in fact, it's not possible to take here because white has a very weak back rank. And that's why the rook was moved out. But queen takes h7. Not so clear anymore. Ivanchuk played rook d5, so he's just trying to protect everything. And here, white played h3, so clearly neither player could calculate properly because they didn't have enough time. And that's kind of a safety first move, trying to give the king some room. In fact, it was possible to play this and give a check and take here. And this endgame apparently should be about equal. Bishop and 2 against a rook. But anyway, that's what the computer says. I believe it, actually. Yeah. I mean, I don't think in practical terms shouldn't be too difficult for white to hold. Anyway, h3 is one of those pragmatic moves that you make when you're short of time. Bishop d8. Okay, interesting. Queen check. King f7. Another check. King e8. And here is where, on move 39, White made a terrible mistake. He could play Queen g7, and that sets up this threat again. And you can see that, Black's pieces don't look too good here. But it should be about equal. But instead, White gave a check and Queen g7. Maybe he thought he was basically taking this knight with tempo after the check, but there's a difference. Because with the bishop on e7, when White goes for this endgame, that is 3 pawns and a bishop for the rook, and those pawns should decide the game. And if rook takes, oh, this is really nice. What happens if rook takes? This didn't happen. Okay, maybe it's time for you to have a think, me to have a drink. Cheers. Black to play. What would you do? That's a good cup of tea. Barry's tea. Barry's gold. That's a good Irish brand. Well, Queen a1 check. King here and takes. And bishop d6, that's the trick. Oh, beautiful stuff. That must have been White's intention, but got to this position and realised that piece can't be taken. It's either a lost endgame or, well, in both cases, a lost endgame. So Queen g8 played and bishop takes b4. And now, I'm not going to say Ivanchuk's on easy street. It's still complex, but it's a lot easier to handle this position anyway, because the king finds relative safety. Yeah, if rook takes, then this, and don't forget there's a mate on g1. So rook g1, that's very unfortunate. And the king steps into a safer position. Queen d6, notice these squares are covered very beautifully. All Black's pieces they're now protected. And knight c6, chunky. That is really chunky. Look at this. So the queen would love to hassle the king, but all these squares are protected by the knight, queen, the king. Wow, that really is an impenetrable fortress. And Ivanchuk can just turn to pushing the pawns in the middle, activating this rook. Yeah, obviously a winning position. And indeed, Petkov resigned here. But what a game. I mean, I have to say, Ivanchuk was really brave. I mean, really brave. Some of his decisions were extraordinary. But fair play to his opponent, Momchil Petkov from Bulgaria, because he really went for it as well. So a fantastic struggle. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to show you some more, hopefully one more game or one more video featuring games by Ivanchuk from the Menorca Open. His performance really was very special. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.